Hey there, and welcome to episode 12 of Living a You-Filled Life podcast. I'm your host, Fola Veritas. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to have a conversation about meditation and whether or not it's a dangerous act mentally or emotionally or even spiritually. So this podcast episode is in response to this recent video I watched by a YouTuber by the name of DEBUNKED. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He wrote about the dangers of meditation and provided some pretty relevant facts and research to prove the point. But as you know, I'm a proponent of meditation, mindfulness, and all that good stuff. Having my own personal practice and experiences with a wide range of meditations, I feel that meditation is something that's really helped me on my journey. And it was one of the things I did right from the beginning of when I had my spiritual emergence. So I like to really use it in addition to other types of spiritual practices. It's not really the only thing that I do, but it does help me to tune in more deeply and connect to my inner knowing and to what spirit is guiding me to. So a little bit about this Steven character who created the video. I hadn't actually heard about this guy until a colleague of mine sent me a video about his story. And I guess main things about him are that he was quite a famous YouTuber who spoke a lot about spirituality and the new age sort of revolution. But he had an event occur in which I believe he experienced Jesus firsthand, and then he just took a total 180 into Christianity. And since then, he's been educating people on the risks of the New Age movement, things like that. So I won't really talk too much about him necessarily because I don't really know much about him. I think I was trying to find some of his previous works. I think someone maybe had sent me some articles that he'd written that had been archived, so I'll have to take a look at those still. But if you have any ideas or thoughts, definitely leave me a message because I'd like to hear what you think about his conversion. Just the same thing happened with Doreen Virtue not that long ago. I do find it fascinating that people can make these complete switches. So in the video, he goes into a lot of depth about different research and case studies that have been gathered over the years about people's just personal experiences with meditation that were far from positive. And he highlights one research article that was published in 2017 from some researchers in the States, I believe, who basically found that there were multiple different types of challenges or maybe more negative experiences that meditators experienced that were typically not shared during other meditation practices. When we finish meditation, usually people are talking about the really positive benefits or what their experiences were and how profound they were. But in this study, they wanted to really dive into what exactly are people experiencing that are negative and to talk a bit about those. So first off, Stephen mentions the fact that, the benefit of the study is that they looked at a wide range of meditators. Just to kind of quote here, it was said there 43% of the people that were interviewed had meditated for at least 10,000 hours or more, while 49% meditated between 1,000 hours and 10,000 hours. So that's a pretty high amount of meditation hours, I would think. I'm not really sure where I'm at. It's only been a few years, though, so these people have been meditating for quite some time, or at least very in depth. Another thing that they noted of the people who they interviewed for this research study was that 60% of the participants that they interviewed were actually meditation teachers. So whatever that means. They kind of mentioned how they were, at least Stephen does, about how these people were educated. I think some people having master's degrees and things like that. So it's kind of interesting. We're talking about people who are pretty experienced at meditating, having a general idea about what to expect, right? So they go on to explain that out of the 60 people that were interviewed, 82% reported some type of experience with fear, anxiety, or paranoia. 57% reported depression or some type of grief. 50% reported a social impairment. 47% reported some type of delusional or quote-unquote irrational paranormal beliefs. 47% experienced a physical pain. 30% reported rage, anger, aggression, which I think is actually kind of a low number, so that's interesting. And 27% reported sleep disorders or different difficulties, and 25% reported self-conscious emotions and insecurity. So it's definitely interesting when we look at those numbers. Like that's a pretty high experience, especially about fear and anxiety. Hey, I definitely like to look at those numbers and apply it to, hey, kind of where have I been in my life? And something I quoted from the study itself was the fact that many of these difficulties that were experienced, it's interesting because the people who are more experienced meditators saw it as a necessary stage of practice. And that you could only really resolve it by passing through that stage, right? Doing the certain meditations and also integrating whatever experience it was. And again, there's that keyword integration, which I truly believe is the key to any type of healing work or spiritual practice. Is you can do all the spiritual work, but if you don't integrate what you're learning or experiencing, it's basically like you've just like flushed everything down the drain. So after reading the study, scanning it, let's be honest, I didn't read it. It was quite a lengthy one. I'll definitely try to link it in the comments description. But it really had me thinking back to my personal experience with meditation, particularly when I went to a Vipassana 10-day silent meditation retreat this past year. And so I'd love to share a bit about that and the whole dark side of meditation, because some of the ideas that this guy's kind of presenting is that, hey, meditation actually is worse for you than anything else, and that it's opening people up to a lot of unknown sort of demonic things is what they're saying, which I don't necessarily believe that part, but it is what it is. So let me share a bit about my Vipassana experience. And just a disclaimer, this is not everybody's experience. This is mine, Fola Veritas's. This is what I experienced pre and during and post the meditation retreat. So I would highly encourage you, if you're interested in Vipassana, you seek it out and you figure out what it's meant for you. And what your experience will be your experience. I think it's important to know that, even when we have these conversations, which was kind of what happened for me prior to signing up, was just becoming more aware of different people's experiences of that same event. And so before I actually even started the retreat, I had so many fears arise. Just a lot of doubt about my doing it. Just completing the application process was a bigger deal than it probably needed to be. They had the administrators who were kind of reviewing the applications contact me about mine. So I just remember thinking this is strange. Why do they keep contacting me? And is there something I'm not doing right? Maybe it's because I use cannabis and you have to put all that information on there. Who knows? But my friend at the time, who was also coming to the same retreat as me, it seemed as though she wasn't having any of these issues. So I was just these people must be really judging me. And it wasn't until I talked on the phone with one particular admin. She really shed light on the matter, which it was kind of in line with what I thought was happening, was the fact that, hey, I have some things here that need to be like healed. And I realized it was just a lot of shame about who I was as a person and my character. And this was kind of just being like a trigger for some events that had happened in my past that involved like another application process with a security clearance and all these things where I felt like I was being kind of beat down, right, for who I was. So that was the whole thing. Even when we arrived at the retreat center, like there was so much excitement and like kind of this underlying uncertainty and anxiety about what was going to happen, you know, and I knew like prior to that I had my work cut out for me. And like I mentioned, you know, sometimes when we're wanting to do things, it's as though the universe is like throwing the exact opposite in our perspective. And what was happening was prior to the retreat, I kept coming across different articles or posts about people who'd done Vipassana and had had basically like psychotic episodes or manic symptoms, where there was one in particular that was shared in the spiritual emergence group I'm in, where a person had written an article sometime after they had personally been dragged out of a Vipassana meditation by the police because of having manic symptoms. So all these things were in my mind. We get to the site and I'm like, oh my gosh, this place is just an old hospital. It's like some type of old long-term care facility that the retreat center had purchased. So it was really playing with my mind, the fact that, hey, I'm about to like walk into this whole other world where I'm like, as if I'm actually a patient. And again, these are just my fears of like losing my mind. And this is something I've always had. So that paranoia that they talk about as having quite a high rate, right? What, 82% of fear, anxiety. That's a high number of people reporting that amongst those interviewers or interviewees. So yeah, I mean, if you know me personally, I tend to be, or I have been, a pretty paranoid person. I'm analyzing every move and process that's occurring. I mean, that's just who I am for whatever reason. But the Vipassana really highlighted this dangerous obsession of mine. And especially like, for instance, when I was eating, you know, because you don't make eye contact with anyone. You're 10 days silent, no talking, no interactions with anyone except if you absolutely need to talk to one of the support staff or the teacher, right? So here I am, like sitting facing a wall at every meal, eating, you know, some food that you'll learn to love, and thoughts that like just kept arising about people's intentions around me. And it was like so intense sometimes. Like I legit was like, holy shit, like what is going on? And I remember at one point, I almost like wanted to just go back to my room during one meal. But then I like remember thinking, Fola, like if you do that, like what if you lose your mind in the bedroom and then you're by yourself and then da 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 da, right? So like talking about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. But what I learned is like just sitting through that paranoia, through that anxiety, it passed. Even though it seemed to build up on itself as each day kind of progressed, but with different themes or around different behaviors or actions that I was taking. So definitely interesting. But when we talk about the paranoia, that includes all that fear. And that's one thing for sure. Were fears like from thinking that animals that were outside were going to sometime come inside and like attack me. There was this one incident, I was trying to meditate in the room and I could hear this like wasp trying to get in through the screen of the window, and my roommates had left the window open. So I could just hear this like incessant buzzing sound. It was just like this whole 2-hour period of meditating. It was just nonstop. And I remember at one point thinking, okay, this is just like a total test from the universe, because I started having these fearful thoughts that, hey, like this wasp is going to get inside this room and it's going to sting me, and I have no idea if I'm allergic because I've never been stung, and I will be allergic, and then I'm going to end up needing an ambulance, but it's going to be like impossible for the ambulance to get there in time. And it just, like, honestly, that script in my mind just went with it. And that was a very challenging time because I remember thinking, like, just open your eyes, like, open your eyes, Fola. I just could, like, as if I was hearing this voice to just do that and change and not keep up with the meditation. And all these times that I experienced that need to, like, shift my body or whatever, it seemed to be pushed through by some type of negative experience. And the way I interpreted that was actually kind of like the devil, or what we would interpret as the devil, trying to stop me from connecting more deeply to that truth inside me. And I'll talk a bit about that in a bit, but yeah, that's just, it like seemed just so much more clear as the days went on. So I mentioned anger as being a lower percentage, which surprised me because my understanding was there would be a bit more of anger, and maybe that's just because I feel like there was a lot of anger inside me at the time. But there was one instance where I had like just excessive amounts of anger. I wanted to punch like the fuck out of a wall. I remember thinking, like, what type of trouble would I get in if I actually caused damage to the building? It didn't last very long, but I just remember feeling so uncomfortable. And I think it was like one of the group sittings, because it's probably good that it was, because otherwise I would have been probably alone privately and done something. But that frustration, you know, I can't imagine how some people who maybe aren't used to anger or have been told how horrible anger is would feel, and the fact that they would then think, you know, like that would add to the bubbling up of the emotion or that feeling, and who knows what type of things that would happen. So it is a very uncomfortable feeling for sure. It doesn't mean we're not supposed to experience it. We're supposed to learn to acknowledge anger and embrace that and realize what it is that we're angry about, and see how we can then allow that anger to pass through and not be held in our body, right? So a couple other things that came up was the fact about the feelings of sadness, which they do mention. The tears that I shed during this retreat were like so much, and it was interesting because I'd had a card reading with someone prior to that, and that was kind of the theme that they mentioned. There's a lot of releasing that was going to take place, and for sure there was. And I remember multiple times, like after group sittings, opening my eyes and there would be a little tissue kind of by my like feet, probably because maybe someone, whoever it was, came and gave it to me. So I appreciate all the fellow students I was practicing with for their patience with all my sniffles. But, you know, a lot of times there was this shame and guilt that just brought up all the sadness inside of me. And it was just releasing. Like, it wasn't me holding on and living anymore in that. It was just these beautiful moments of realization of, wow, like, all that hardness and negativity I put on myself no longer really mattered, you know. And to me, that was the beauty of the emotions and the beauty of the whole process that came about from being in a safe space with other people who were equally as committed as I was to shifting and empowering myself. And yeah, like that was just so beautiful to me. But when I think about that versus those maybe more dark, heavier emotions, I could see why someone might not really like that. And I think that one other interesting feeling or experience that maybe they didn't talk about was the temptation piece, because that was another thing that came up quite a few times, where I would have very vivid sexual images arise in my like third eye, or just in my awareness of my current partner or my exes, whoever, just like really vivid, where it was easy for me to want to go off onto this like fantasy line and just relive or create these like stories. But that too, I realized, whoa, that's another way that like the devil, quote unquote, is trying to take me into this place. And temptation also occurred with food, because I know there were times I was thinking about food, and again, you're eating a very simple meal here, so you're not experiencing all those grand meals and exciting experiences that we have in our normal everyday life. So definitely, it was quite the experience for me, moving through all those emotions, and then stepping as well into what I feel is sometimes more fearful, the physical sensations, the perceptual sort of experiences, or my perception shifting to something where then I wasn't really sure, was it reality or not? Especially being that you don't have a clock or time necessarily, everything just becomes this kind of jumbled way of perceptualizing, if that's a word, your reality. And sleep was something that really was much more challenging for me. I didn't really sleep. Though I wasn't tired, I just felt as though I was always in this high energetic space. And again, a fear for me was having kind of the Kundalini rising experience. And I felt as though I was like on the brink of that, and I wasn't really sure if I was ready or able yet to just really give into it. And yeah, I can see why for some people that would be seen as a horrible thing to have happen, So I really think that there was a blessing, even though all these things were happening. I came out of that space with like such a loving feeling in my heart, so much joy and peace. And I'm so thankful for all the people who helped hold that space, and especially for the teacher that I had for the women's side, who was just like absolutely brilliant and so supportive. And really, I think because she was present, it really helped me to work through the challenges that I faced over those 10 days. And that was a conversation that I'd had with some people on a recent course I was taking on meditation through imhu.org. And it was the fact that we need to educate people more on why sometimes these challenging experiences can come up during these spiritual practices that we often tend to just try to like shove under the carpet, So I definitely think without the proper support in place, that can become a bigger challenge for people. So just to touch a bit on like the last day in which we had broken the vow of silence, it really shed light on what I had experienced when they had set out all these books and we were looking at them, and I was seeing some materials about, like, there were picture stories of the Buddha, very graphic images, just like the vivid like images. And at this point, like, I'd actually not really broken out of the silence. Like, I had not talked to anyone yet, even though people around me were socializing. I just felt like this need to just be in this space. And I really felt like I was on this other level still, like raised above, like kind of like this dense vibration of the conversation. And I turned to the book, and this one page that showed a picture of the Buddha during the meditation where he was being seduced by these daughters of this one entity or this other deity, seduced for like all the things that beautiful woman could seduce a man for. But then also he experienced all these very fearful, dark, negative, evil sort of images of like death and all these things. And the image, I think, of the one creature was very much of this like kind of like demonic sort of view, right? And I realized at that point that that is exactly what I had gone through. Like, I'm not even, I was just like, wow, like this darkness goes so much deeper than we think, where we think it's this external thing. But I was like, no, this is actually me creating all of these walls and these shadows and all these parts that I think are external, but it's all coming from within. And it's really for me to be like, hey, can you focus on the goal and create that will and that concentration in order to bring and focus on the light no matter what is going on around? And it wasn't necessarily pleasant during those full 10 days, right? And I don't know if I necessarily want to do it right at this very moment, but it was really eye-opening for me. And my concept of evil and the devil, that really shifted. I mean, I've always had different views about that since I was younger, but this really helped me to see that, we can be pulled there and that we need to focus on living a life of love and focusing on love and not this fear that is so easily talked about in society and pushed on the media and shared amongst different dogmatic groups. So I think it's just, a beautiful process if we can think past those fears, right? See past them. So the reasons for these experiences, I think, is really that we all have these emotions underlying each of us, inside of us. And I feel like it's pretty normal that even though, people among us, there's that fear of having an emotional or mental disturbance, and then there's this fear of experiencing hard things in life. And obviously there's a dogma that exists that really pushes for people to live this pure and only positive life, like one without any hardships. But I don't think that's necessarily what we're meant to experience. I also don't think it's meant to be hard, right? I feel like there's ways we can learn to process what's happening, right? But I just want to share a bit about that story about from the Old Testament of Job, because that to me is quite like the epitome of what we're talking about here. And so to those of you who aren't aware, Job was a man of God who was like so blessed. And I'll just kind of quote from Job 1 in the Old Testament. It said, "In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East." Like that's a pretty that's a big blessing there, I would think. So here was Job, this man of God who just thrived. And one day, God's up with the angels, and it says that Satan was among them as well. Satan meaning the adversary in the, I think, Hebrew terminology, which you would think is kind of weird, considering shouldn't Satan be in hell, according to some of those words? But, I mean, that's a whole other debate we can have. But basically, they're having this conversation about Job, and the debate occurs that, Satan's like, okay, God, I bet you that I can get Job to turn away from his righteous life if he were to miss out on all his blessings. And God's like, sure, bet's on, and tells Satan that he can do whatever he wishes, but he's not allowed to put a finger on Job. So Job, through the book of Job, proceeds to lose everything, his family, everything that belonged to him. And it's rather quite tragic if we think about it. Just, kind of sad. But if we think about, God kind of let that happen in order to show the importance of faith and hope and trust. So fast forward to the end of the book, and basically, despite all those things, Job keeps his faith and doesn't curse God, and he's rewarded with even more than he could ever imagine. So, I mean, who are we to say that we're not meant to be on this earth and experience the ups and downs of life? And that includes occasional hard emotions or thoughts that could come up during meditation. That could also include experiences of, mental breakthroughs or breakdowns, because it's almost as though you need to just completely clear away all that is no longer necessary to make room for even more. And David and I, my partner, we have conversations about mental health and wellness, and we've come to this agreement of like the definition of psychosis being like a clean slate or clear slate, and the need for whatever is going on to just kind of reset that hard drive of our mind and who we are as a person. Though it may not seem like that in the moment, there is something that's going on, right? So of course, there are going to be occasions in which people struggle with ups and downs, right? And people are going to experience some really challenging events during any type of meditation, whether it's a 10-day silent retreat or whatever the case might be. And it's really important that we tap into knowing that, hey, I have the ability to grow, I have the ability to shift, and to also realize that even though maybe we think it's something negative, we could try to see it in a different light, see how it's going to help us grow. And I also think that when they mention people having these maybe negative experiences during meditation, even with spiritual emergence where someone's waking up to the power within them, I believe it's because a lot of people have more sensitive way about them, that they are able to receive information, have experiences that are in alignment with this high sensitivity. And so they're just becoming more aware of things that we might not see or hear in our like quote unquote normal reality. And that could then manifest itself in having out-of-body experiences or encounters with other beings and realms, or really deep spiritual awakenings, right? But one thing I did learn for sure from the Vipassana is the fact that we need to remain equanimous to any situation, to the sensations, feelings, emotions that arise in our life, whether it's fear, sadness, happiness, or apathy that arises. We're to remove any attachment to those and try to just be present with them. And of course, it's much easier to attach to happiness and blessings than it is to fears and chaos, but it's important for us to learn both, right? And to say that these challenging experiences are wrong and that they should be completely avoided is really just foolish. And saying, like, really that we shouldn't experience rainbows or sunshine, I mean, you know, I do believe it's inevitable, and that for some it can become so overwhelming they can't comprehend the experience, but we have to have both sides of the spectrum. So for sure, meditation, it's not for the light-hearted or the faint-hearted. I also don't believe it's evil or related to demonic possession. I believe that things come up for us to receive and understand, and that people and their past experiences and fears that have been programmed into them from any of this dogma or different belief systems, the way that they interpret the challenging meditative experience is one that aligns with any of those beliefs. Like, they need to really look again, see what it is that they're fearful of, and tap into the truth that is for them. Because again, I mean, that's how framework's been created, and we can renew the mind and body and soul. We can remove these frameworks. We can create a new world within us, be born again. You know, that might be a little blasphemous, but I guess I'll stand with that. But do you know what I mean? It's about that clean slate, creating something new, connecting with what works for you. If that means sitting for 10 hours, if that's too much, don't do it. If it sounds like a fun time, do it every day if you need to. Maybe meditation's not even the right thing for you because you just can't handle or think about sitting down with your eyes closed. Doesn't mean you can't go and pray or contemplate, be with spirit, have a conversation in whatever way, going out in nature. These are all wonderful ways. Making art or being creative. Even just like volunteering and showing love and compassion to another human being, to another animal, whatever. These are things that we can do that align with our soul and help us to really tap into that truth of who we are. And also, of course, being mindful that moderation is equally important. And so don't overdo it, right? Listen to your body, listen to your soul. Trust that you will receive the guidance and you'll be guided along the path in the way that is meant for you. Okay? So that's basically all I wanted to share. I appreciate you listening to my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts about meditation, if it's something that scares you or not, because if it is, let's test some of those fears, right? Push yourself to the limits that only you know are within you, right? Really, there are no limits. We just have self-imposed those or have had them imposed on us by others. So you can become the greatness that you are, and you can live that you-filled life, that fulfilled life, where you are fully empowered and embracing every part of you to create the life that you want. And that, to me, is the beautiful part of meditation. So I will leave it at that. I appreciate you listening, and leave me a message or a comment. And if you're interested in joining our Facebook group at Living a You-Filled Life, please do so, because we are building up the numbers this year, and we are really building this community of supporting each other in creating that life that we want. So I look forward to chatting with you all soon. Bye.